you decided to write a book. Why inflation? Why that subject?
First of all, because it's the most important subject of them all. Yeah. So
everywhere or within economics?
I think in society.
Wow, it's a bold statement. But I'm not going to disagree with you.
Because money is so important for society, for civilization, and if you don't have sound money, if you have money that you can manipulate, and that has a very big impact on how society is and how it affects individuals as well, of course. So I consider it to be the most important subject.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I mean, me and Danny yesterday interviewed a man by the name of Luke Guoman. Do you know him?
I've heard the name, yes.
Yeah, he's worth a follow. And we were talking about inflation. We were talking about the high levels of debt that the US government, UK government, European governments, governments around the world are saddled with. We have a sovereign debt crisis. And most economists I've spoken to have come to the conclusion there's two ways of ending this sovereign debt crisis. Is either a default or you inflate it away. But the debt, you have to somehow remove the debt. And I don't know what inflation is in Norway, but at the moment in the UK, what are we, 11%?
Yeah, I think it's 10.4%.
10.4%, and it's not come down, whereas in the USA, at least managed to knock it down a bit. Do you know what the Norway rate is? What have you got there?
I'm just having a look.
6.5, I think.
Show off.
I think the numbers, the new numbers came yesterday, I think.
And I don't know how much trust there is in the Norwegian government. By the way, I've been to Norway, and I think it's one of the most amazing countries in the world. Firstly, everything fucking works. Everything works. When I went to
Oslo, you haven't been there long enough then.
Well, I've been in the UK long enough. When the trains are on time, everything's clean. The air is lovely. The women are beautiful. It's a great country. And I'm going back. When are we going? Yeah. June, July? Oslo Freedom Forum.
Yeah, it's in June, I think.
Will you be there?
I hope so, yes.
I hope you are.
Yeah.
What's the Norwegian rate?
6.5.
6.5, so 11% here. And I don't know how much trust you have in your government, but I know fundamentally when it's 11.2%, wherever it is, that's the lowest they've been able to get it in the way they manipulate figures. I think inflation, firstly, is personal, so it depends on what you're buying. But your experience of inflation is a lot higher than 11%. So Luke said, very casually, we probably are going to, they could extend inflation 10 to 20% over 5, 10, 15 years, or they might just squeeze it all out in one go and probably have 2-3 years of over 100% inflation. And we were like, huh? He was like, very casually, he said, this is highly likely. And he explained the case study of Israel when they did the same. And he said, it's still a flourishing economy. It's a nice place to visit. And I was thinking, that is going to have a catastrophic effect on many, many people.
And he said it as like, it's a tail risk, but it's possible. Like, it's within the realms of possibility.
He said, we're definitely going to have inflation and high inflation. And it's likely that we'll contract and expand the numbers. But there's every chance we hit very high inflation. And I was just, I worry with that about the catastrophic impact it has on hundreds of millions of people. So, therefore, that's my long-winded way of saying I can see why you think this is the most important subject of our time. So someone new was listening, Rune, and they didn't understand what inflation is. Because, by the way, there's sometimes two ways of explaining inflation. Some people think price rises is inflation. It's not necessarily inflation. Price rises can come from inflation, but it's not inflation. But some people think price rises themselves are inflation. Should we explain in the most basic form possible, like I'm 5, what inflation is so people understand?
Okay, like you're 5?
Yeah,
that's
like I'm 5.
Challenge. But
you want to try being 5.
What I tried to do with my book was to avoid falling in the trap of having this discussion on semantics, what inflation is. So I said that basically you have price inflation, which I define, monetary inflation, which I define as an increase in the money supply, that you have more money in society. And then you have price inflation, which is a general increase in the prices, in the price level. And then I said that there's a causality there. So you need to have an increase in the money supply in order to have a general price increase, the price inflation. So,
sorry, just to interrupt. A general price increase would be, so for example, say Connor over there sells hats, and suddenly he gets a lot of exposure and there's a lot of demand. He raises his prices. That's not a general increase in price. That's a isolated based on performance. When you say general, you mean broad increase in the price of everything due. Yeah.
And I don't limit it to consumer goods, of course. It's real estate, it's stocks, everything. And of course, due to technological innovation, etc., some prices some goods will fall in price, while others, of course, will increase in price. But the basic rule is that you need a general increase in the supply of money in order to have a general increase in the prices. So that's very important for people to understand. That I think just to point out those basic facts, it's very important for normies, for ordinary people who didn't read a lot of economics. They need to understand this fact. It's the most important issue.
See, when I was growing up, I would always hear about inflation on the news, the target inflation rate, what the rate is. And I just grew up thinking inflation was one of those things that's a natural part of a growing economy. And, if we were above inflation, that would be not necessarily a bad thing. But if we would go below inflation rates and, if we went under 2, that's dangerous. And so we had to try and get back to 2. So I was perhaps gaslighted into believing inflation was a good part of a healthy economy. And that's not true, is it?
No, it's not true at all. And it has been a scam all the time, If you go back, I would say 20 years back to year 1900 or something like that. If an economist said that it's healthy for the economy to have price inflation, people would have been looking at him and why? Why is that healthy? And then just 30 years later, beginning actually in the 1920s and 1930s, that was what economists started to say, that you need some inflation to grease the wheels of the economy. And I had to write a little bit about that transition as well in my book. I have a chapter on the history of economics, how it developed. And I explained to people that it started with the difficulties they saw actually also here in England with trying to negotiate the salaries with the workers when the prices dropped due to a stable money supply. Prices dropped over time and you had to negotiate the wages with the workers, and they were very reluctant with respect to accepting a lower nominal wage, which might have been a higher real wage because the money was more valuable. So in order to overcome those difficulties, Keynes he said that it's easier to negotiate and have a transition in the necessary transition in the economy if we have some monetary inflation. It sort of greases the wheels. The workers, they accept real wage decreases because they believe that they earn more money. And in nominal terms, they did, of course. So this was sort of the key thing within the economics theory that won through. And of course, it was very popular with the politicians. They would like to have more monetary inflation because the state was one of the first users of the newly created money. So it was a very popular thing with respect to getting the support, from science. The professor started to say that inflation is good for the economy. And the rest of the story is just tragic, But also for the academia, the people who worked as economists, who were against inflation, they were basically frozen out of the universities, etc. The politicians wouldn't listen to them. They became what we call in Norwegian a pariakaste. Pariah, yes.
Yeah.
So what happened in the 20s and 30s within academia, it was very bad for society.